Lotus Ventures Inc. is a BC-based medical marijuana company poised to launch into the rapidly evolving cannabis sector. Lotus is in the final review stage of the Health Canada approvals to become a licensed producer, having arranged facility financing of up to $12 million, plus building permits for its prototype indoor production facility. Shares trade under the symbol J on the Canadian Securities Exchange. Visit our website at lotusventures.ca.
Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Tom Raycove, CEO and founder of Disruptive Logic, his website disruptedlogic.com. Welcome back to the show, Tom.
Hey, Jim. Thank you for having me back again.
All these TV shows about humanoid things that have artificial intelligence, I think, have half the population freaked out about it and the other half wishing they were robots. Maclean's had an interesting article. Why does Canada give away its ideas on artificial intelligence? Why do we?
I read that article as well. It's a really interesting article. And I think that the byline was that artificial intelligence is catnip to check-wielding politicians, but their investments won't pay unless we stop hawking patents. Now, what was really interesting about this is that our Canadian provinces and our federal government have been working really, really hard to become global technology leaders, or to represent Canada as a global technology leader. And I think recently the Vector Institute for Artificial Intelligence, based out of Toronto, received a $100 million grant or a fund from the province and the federal government.
Has BC seen any funding?
They certainly have. The BC Tech Fund received $100 million from the British government back in 2016. And this is just a really good, strong indicator of where the governments are right now with AI and how they want to represent Canada on the global scale. The feds have been really interested in AI technology, and I think they've allocated close to $125 million in funding already to the Pan-Canadian Artificial Intelligence Strategy. And in that article that we both read, a law professor from McGill, his name is Richard Gold, was quoted as saying that we're locking ourselves out of the possibility of creating an AI powerhouse in Canada. And this is all because the Canadian government, even though they're very supportive of AI and want to create this atmosphere where Canada is a global leader, they just can't figure out how to stop that brain drain, how to stop the leakage of the intellectual property out of Canada.
Well, you're in the high-tech industry. Do you feel that to expand your business, you're going to have to take it to the United States, or will Canadian government rules just quash you down and you'll be overtaxed here?
Well, that's one big part of it. I mean, recently the government has claimed that they really want to go after small businesses. I think to the tune of 73% income tax on small business. That makes it really difficult as a small business, as a startup business, to really want to do business in Canada. The other big problem is that, you know, as it was mentioned in the article, one of the critical measures of success is whether or not a patented technology will or can remain inside Canada without being sold to the foreign giants out there. Right now, over half of the patents that have been developed in Canada have left for the United States. And the irony, Jim, is that Canada is becoming known as innovators and trailblazers, especially in the field of technology and artificial intelligence. So we have to ask, what's really going on here?
Well, should the government, besides having development funds, actually allow the companies that develop, grow, and progress? I saw a report from the Bank of Canada that said, for some mysterious reason, small companies in Canada were not becoming mid-size and large companies. Maybe you've put your finger right on it.
Well, I think that's a big part of it. You know, as a Canadian tech company, we're very quickly overwhelmed by the large U.S. tech giants. One aspect of that is just licensing fees, for example, and I don't want to mention any names, but there's certain companies that we have to do business with. They're very, very big companies. They're primarily based in the United States. And the fees to be able to access their platforms and their technologies are incredibly high and kind of out of the league for a small startup company to really be able to utilize and put those technologies to work. And that in itself is a bit of a problem. But then the next problem that we run into is the whole concept of patent infringement claims. Now, whether those claims are right or they're wrong, and a lot of the times they're wrong, and it just becomes a strategy, in effect, to make it even more difficult for a small company to make any progress. You know, when you start having these kind of problems, it really interferes with the concept of innovation, and it's just too overwhelming, Jim. There was a really good documentary that I would recommend watching called The Patent Scam by Austin Meyer. Now, it's more about patent trolling than it is about what we're just talking about right now, but you get the overall concept of what a lot of tech companies are facing and what they're up against, and the reason why a lot of Canadian companies will just surrender and sell their products or their patents to the big tech giants.
Does it basically work? Someone claims you have violated their patent, and rather than spend tens of millions in court, you just do what you said. You surrender and say, okay, we'll take this in trade in case we did infringe on it, even though we don't think we did.
Well, exactly. Or you come out to some sort of a financial settlement, and it's basically a form of extortion at that point. You know, in the documentary, they use the example of a daycare for physically handicapped children, and the intake workers were using a scanner, a store-bought scanner, to scan documents, and a patent troller had sued them for patent infringement because he felt he owned the concept of being able to scan a piece of paper electronically, and essentially shut them down.
We'll have more with Tom Raycove right after the break.
Arctic Star Exploration, operated by a team of proven mine finders, is focused on diamonds in Finland and the Northwest Territories of Canada. A work program is planned for our Finland property that contains diamond-bearing kimberlite. Arctic Star trades on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ADD, and the Frankfurt Exchange, symbol 82A1. Please visit our website at arcticstar.ca or call us at 604-689-1799.
I'm Brian Fowler, president of Blind Creek Resources Limited, listed on the TSX Venture Exchange, ticker symbol BCK. Blind Creek is focused in the Yukon, Northwest Territories, and British Columbia. The company's key property is the Blend Project, one of the largest undeveloped lead zinc silver deposits in Western Canada, plus plans to advance the recently acquired, fully permitted historic engineered gold mine in the Atlan district of northwestern BC. Check us out at blindcreekresources.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Tom Raycove. Tom, how well does Canada protect intellectual property rights?
My personal experience in it, Jim, hasn't been very positive. I come from an intellectual property background in film, television, and the gaming industries. And, you know, IPs are all about creating something that's never actually existed before. It only exists in your mind. And as an artist, you produce it and you put it out into the world. And when somebody steals your creation, they violate your copyright or your patent or a trademark. Those copyrights, patents, and trademarks are supposed to be protected by our government. Our government is supposed to come to my rescue and help me out with that. Well, my first taste of Canada's lax enforcement of IP rights was on a movie that I had produced, and it was pirated and then redistributed by thieves who didn't have the right to do so. Very quickly, I learned that there was no mechanism in Canada to protect Canadians and enforce the copyright. Now, in the United States, you have agencies like the FBI or Homeland Security who will very aggressively protect intellectual properties. Canada's approach was more of, well, it's just too bad, better luck next time. We used to have a division of the RCMP that investigated copyright and IP issues, but for some reason that's long since gone. And when you look at that, it's no wonder that a lot of Canadian innovators decide to seek protection through the United States over Canada. We've seen Trump's America First efforts, and he's really quite serious about it as well. Canada kind of needs to take a more proactive approach to defending and upholding its laws in protecting innovators, especially when the taxpayer money is involved.
So much for we stand on guard for thee.
Yeah, exactly. It's more like we stand on guard for thee, providing you don't need to have us stand on guard for you.
Well, don't forget, the RCMP symbols are now owned by Disney, so even the Canadian government has acknowledged they can't even look after the Mounties. Well,
that to me is that identifies a very, very big problem that's really quite serious. And, we talked about the article on Maclean's. One of the concepts that they had was a centralized patent fund. And I think that's kind of a good start in being able to provide innovators with access to resources to defend their intellectual properties, to defend their copyrights, their patents, and their trademarks, especially when the government is helping us develop things like artificial intelligence and really innovative technologies like that. And Jim, I'd love to hear more about your thoughts on this.
Well, my thoughts don't mean anything because someone will just steal them and take them, and I won't have any way to get them back. We'll have more with Tom Raycove right after this.
I'm Bill McWilliam, president of Cascadero Copper, CCD on the TSX Venture Exchange. Cesium is one of the world's rarest metals with a growing industrial demand. Drilling is underway on our Tehran property in Argentina to prove up a cesium resource. Cascadero's patent-pending leach process has the potential to make Cascadero the lowest cost supplier of cesium in the world. Visit our website, cascadero.com, or phone us at 604-924-5504.
In Goddard we trust.
Welcome back. We're chatting with Tom Raycove. Tom, is artificial intelligence in the stock market, and is it traded on the stock market?
There's a really cool company out there right now called IPowered Equity ETF. I think their website is www.equbotetf.com. And according to the website, their technology helps equity investors enhance their ability to realize market appreciation and diversify their strategic alpha portfolio exposure. Now, sorry about that sounding like it was read. It was. That's what it actually says on their website. Apparently, this technology works, and it works really well. What they're doing is they're using artificial intelligence to beat the market and to provide better performance on their returns than what market managers can actually do.
Well, they keep telling us you just have to invest in ETFs now. You don't need a real advisor, although if you're smart, you'll still have some human telling you what to do. Is it scary to have robots doing your trades, or is that now so much part of the scenery that there's no way to get around it?
I think it's a combination of both, Jim. For me, yes, it is scary because the way that it works is we're using an algorithm that looks through the listings for companies that are likely to provide a return that outperforms the basic index. Now, what's really exciting about the technology, and this kind of mirrors what we've been talking about here at Disrupted Logic, is that it's using a combination of big data, machine learning, and artificial intelligence to access huge volumes of data to make these predictions. And every day, as you're aware, there's more and more information that you can pick and choose from. So much more that a human manager just can't possibly deal with it. I imagine, that poor guy just losing his mind sitting at his desk trying to keep up with all of this. So we end up starting to use bots, and here's how they work. So what happens is an algorithm or a mathematical formula is created. And this algorithm does things like analyzing historical data, price variations, change in volume. It'll even go as far to analyze current events, news articles, corporate information from press releases and financial reportings, political events, and various other events. It then factors these bits of data and tries to quantify them, and from there a prediction is made. And I think Warren Buffett had said, beware of geeks with formulas. And I'm going to take it a little bit out of context. I think the reason being is because the algorithms themselves don't take into account the concept of chaos theory. And that's where small occurrences, those little tiny things that don't seem very relevant and can be easily overlooked, can have a very, very big and nasty impact on major events down the line. Jim, when we're using the AI to make predictions within the stock market, what we're doing that's a little bit different than using AI for predictive behaviors is that we're taking people and we're segmenting and placing them into one common category versus placing them into individual categories. And when we place them into that one category, what we do is we analyze their reactions to the stock and to the markets. And the problem is, Jim, is that every single investor is different. What I learned when I was raising money for Disrupted Logic is that no two investors think quite the same way or approach an opportunity in the same way. Some are basing their investments on things like the news. Others are basing their investments on an emotion. Some might have brand loyalty and use their gut instincts. And then you have others that are just strictly numbers-based, and they're just purely about the balance sheets. So the question is how do you create an AI that can accurately predict the markets, but can also take into consideration how an individual investor is going to think, and then apply that across a global mechanism like the stock market, especially when chaos theory comes into play? So to me, Jim, it's not just as simple as studying the historical patterns and saying that everything goes up eventually.
Is artificial intelligence being used to spy on us?
Oh, absolutely. I know that you keep up on the news all the time, and one of my friends was mentioning that they're worried about AI being used to spy in this. There's a company based out of Montreal that just recently came up in some conversations. They're in the process of bidding on a few contracts, so I don't want to mention their name. But what they're doing is they're using AI and machine learning to study the social networks of Canadian citizens. And their goal is to profile Canadians on behalf of the government. They want to understand who is saying what and how they're saying it. And they want to use this information to identify potential terrorist risks and threats before those risks and threats happen. They want to identify potential criminals, drug dealers, and other such criminals. And they're doing it by analyzing the feeds of people like you and myself, our friends, and so on Twitter, Facebook, Pinterest, Instagram, and the like. And, we talked about the big push with Canada right now to penalize small businesses with a 73 or 75% base income tax rate. Well, according to the Canadian government, they're losing out on about $48 billion right now annually to an underground economy. And recently in the news, it was brought up that the Canadian government has served PayPal with an injunction for PayPal to share the details on every Canadian citizen who's ever used PayPal over the last 3 years to either buy or sell products. Now, when you combine that with the AI that's being used to spy on Canadians, the purpose here is to help profile those Canadians that are involved in any shape or form in this underground economy and start recovering some of that money.
Does that mean they're also tracking the texts that you send to people and you receive?
Absolutely. They're tracking everything. Here's another good example of it. There's 170,000 surveillance cameras in Moscow right now, and they record something like 20 million hours worth of video at any given time. They're using facial recognition to track every person who moves within the city and falls into the range of one of these, 170,000 cameras. And within the first 2 months of having set this up, the government had identified and captured 6 wanted criminals. But here's where it gets really diabolical. They've also implemented a program through fun apps and gamification strategies to encourage ordinary people living in Moscow, people like you and I, to take photos of our friends and family and even take photos of strangers walking by and post them to social sites where these people can be identified in exchange for fun rewards. And it's all done under the concept of this open world. You know, it's an open world and we can share all this kind of information. And they justify it by using phrases like, it's for our safety and our protection. It's to identify predators and criminals. But where it really becomes a problem for me, Jim, is what happens when a machine learning component is now applied to that. 20 million hours of video per day is a lot of data to sift through. And we heard about a Washington Post report that came out in 2013 that the NSA was developing what they called a pre-crime AI. And this program was actually verified with the Edward Snowden documents that came out. What it is an AI and a machine learning program that will operate in secrecy with no oversight, that collects massive amounts of data on American citizens using things like video, social networks, phone conversations, email, your GPS data, the data that's being generated by your car, you name it, all of this to predict behaviors that include what a given person will do, where they're going to do it, who's involved with that person, and what that person is going to do if they need to get any kind of help. Now again, Jim, we can claim that this is all for the good purpose of helping keep us safe from bad guys. But the problem is how do you define what a bad guy is? Here's what the U.S. government actually defined a bad guy being under this pre-crime program. Dissidents and activists of all types, political and tax protesters, lawyers and educators, publishers, including journalists, Jim, gun owners, illegal aliens, foreign nationals, and everyday people.
Everyday people. Well, then why didn't they just say everyone?
And that's pretty much what it is. Every one of us is now being considered a bad guy, and they want to know more about us. Now, here's what's really scary. There's another U.S. defense project that uses AI and machine learning, and it's called Sentient World Simulation. And Jim, this is so unbelievable that it sounds like it was ripped off out of a really cheap independent sci-fi movie, but this is real stuff. What the U.S. Defense Department is doing with the cooperation of Homeland Security is they're constructing a parallel world to our real world on a computer. And they're using this parallel world, which, by the way, is their words, parallel world, to test propaganda messages and military strategies. They're using these AI algorithms and machine learning to test messages and collect data on every single person in the real world, but using our virtual avatars in the parallel world to do the testing with. They then store this data of how our virtual avatars reacted and use it as a formal part of real-world government records. Now, you and I talked about Minority Report in a previous interview. This is real-world and rather horrifying Minority Report.
Do you see people being arrested, just like in Minority Report?
Absolutely. I see it being very, very frightening. We've seen historically, with governments that are overthrown, who do they typically go after first? They go after the dissidents and the activists. They go after the lawyers and the educators. They go after the media professionals, the journalists, and they shut those people up right away. Imagine an AI, Jim, that has already pre-labeled you as a threat to the government because you're a journalist. And imagine further that AI has already run test scenarios against the virtual you and has made a decision as to what thinks the real you might do. And imagine that the real you is going to be punished and penalized for something that the virtual you has done, but you haven't yet been involved in.
Kind of like the way your wife is when she looks at your texts and wonders, what's that for, and should I punish him for it?
Well, at least she's got something substantial to look at. With what the government is talking about, it's far, far, far worse than that. You know, I wanted to share a quote from PBS Nova from 2009. I've looked this up. Basically what that quote is with the entire internet and thousands of databases for our brain, the device, and they're referring to the Sentient World program, the device will be able to respond almost instantaneously to complex questions posed by intelligence analysts. As more data is collected through phone calls, credit card receipts, social networks like Facebook and MySpace. Now remember, this is 2009, so MySpace still existed. GPS tracking, cell phone geolocation and internet searches, Amazon purchases, and even toll records as you cross toll bridges and so on. It may one day be possible to know not just where people are and what they're doing, but also what and how they think. And Jim, for me, that's where AI gets scary. AI in itself is not a frightening thing. I see it being, incredibly beneficial. It's when it's put to use in these kind of ways that I become concerned with where we're going with it.
Well, the Vancouver police already admit that they use the Compass Card Transit Pass, which is a computerized chip device, to track people, and they believe that they can predict criminal behavior or find criminals with it. So every time you get on a bus or SkyTrain, yeah.
Do you have more information that you could point us to? I'd love to do a little bit more research on that.
Well, I just saw a brief news article on it on television where, yes, they say they are tracking people, and being the police, they always tell us it's for our own good and protection.
Of course. And Jim, you want to know what's also frightening about this sort of thing is that this is what's being shared with us right now. I kind of look at it like the tip of the iceberg. 90% of the iceberg is underwater and you don't see it. So I'm curious about what the other 90% is that they're not sharing with us right now.
Well, we'll dig around and see what we can find, but of course, the more you dig, the more they know about you.
Yes, the rabbit hole just gets deeper and deeper.
Tom, anything else you wanted to add today?
No, I just wanted to thank you very much for having me on again, and I would love to continue this conversation with you further, and let me know when we can do it.
Well, we'll chat before Santa comes and delivers our next AI device.
That would be exciting.
I've been speaking with Tom Raycove. He's the founder and CEO of Disruptive Logic, his website, disruptedlogic.com. You're listening to the Goddard Report on TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Find us on Twitter at TalkDigitalNet. Our popular YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Apparently the AI's like that. Questions for the show can be emailed to info@howstreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Thanks for listening.
Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of How Street Media Incorporated.